if David Parker can deal with those calculations.
Question at number 8, Dr. David Clark.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Revenue and asks, before the launch of their September 2011 Transformation Programme Planning Services Registration of Interests, how many companies did IRD expect would comply with the mandatory requirements listed in 4.3 of the Registration of Interests, and of those, how many were expected to be New Zealand-owned companies?
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the registration of interest was to identify companies or consortiums, regardless of where they were based, that have the capacity and the capability to provide the services necessary for that particular phase of Inland Revenue's transformation program. Inland Revenue had no expectation of how many New Zealand-based businesses would register their interest either individually or as part of a consortium.
Dr. David, point of order, Dr.
That was a very straight question on notice, Mr. Speaker, and I don't feel that it was adequately addressed. It was not clear that there was no expectation. It was.
Well, order the.
There was also no, sorry.
Order the Minister has indicated in his answer that he simply does not have that information. That there was no. I take it the Minister was telling the House there was no record of expectation with respect to New Zealand or foreign-owned companies.
There was no question of an expectation, Mr. Speaker. We simply asked for a registration of interest, and we didn't have a figure in mind at the outset as to how many from New Zealand or elsewhere would seek to register.
I think that seems a pretty clear answer. Dr. David Clark.
Unbelievable. What conversations has the Inland Revenue Department or its project consultant Capgemini had with Accenture about their Aspire system? And given the close working relationship between Capgemini and Accenture in previous projects overseas, how will their consultants manage conflicts of interest in tender processes?
Mr. Speaker, I think the problem is that the member fundamentally misunderstands what's going on. Capgemini's involvement with this particular aspect of the project ceased with the presentation of their report in July. And in fact, it did work in partnership with a local company, Tenzing Management and Technology Consultants Limited. The next phase of the project will be subject to an open tender process.
Dr. David Clark.
What involvement has David Butler, former IRD Commissioner, who subsequently managed the Trouble Change Program in the Australian Taxation Office, had in advising on the IRD's Business Transformation Program? And is the Minister aware of blowouts in the Australian experience that doubled the cost of implementation of the Accenture package, costing hundreds of millions of dollars, after David Butler went on record saying the Australians would have been crazy not to go with Accenture?
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
The question, can I answer, sorry, Mr. Speaker, can I answer that question in two parts? Firstly, when we began this transformation process work under the previous government in about 2007, a very conscious decision was made then not to go down the path that the Australians had gone down to for precisely the feared reasons at that point that the member has now advanced. With regard to Mr. Butler's involvement or alleged involvement, I am not aware of any role that he has played in respect of this process.
Dr. David Clark.
Why has the IRD blocked access to anything but the title and date of 80 documents relating to the Department's Business Transformation Program, including its engagement processes? And does the Minister not think it is in the public interest for transparency of process to apply in the case of a project where ministers in his own cabinet have estimated costs at between $700 million and $1.5 billion of taxpayer money?
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
For precisely the reasons again implied in the member's question. These are commercially sensitive matters. The process is ongoing and has not yet been finalised. It has been a long-standing practice, supported by the previous Ombudsman, that where papers that related to work that was currently underway were sought, it was perfectly appropriate for the government to withhold those until such time as the projects and the decisions had been made, and that's exactly the practice that's been followed in this particular instance.
Dr. David Clark.
Did Capgemini or any of its recent employees have any formal or informal role in shaping the Department's September 2011 registration of interest?
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr. Speaker, to my knowledge, the answer to that question is no, because we were inviting an expression of interest from various potential suppliers at that time. Capgemini, through the consortium that I referred to earlier, became the preferred operator after that process, it would have been illogical for them to have had any involvement in its design.
Point of order, Mr.
Point
Speaker.
of order, Dr. David Clark.
I seek leave to table the registration of interest document for the provision of transformation program planning services. The source is the IRD. It's no longer available, as far as I'm aware, on the website. With particular reference to the mandatory requirements under 4.3.
Leavers sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 9, Alfred Naru.
Speaker, to the Minister of Courts.